first yesterday. The head of the Federal Treasury Department, Dr. Stephen Kennedy, made a big speech telling the government what needed to be done in order to improve the long-term health of our economy. Well, excuse me, the Treasury Secretary is actually part of the government, and when he publicly muses on what the government should and shouldn't do, he's really giving advice to himself. Now, of course, what he said, it's accurate. We do need to improve our productivity. We do need to get public spending under control and debt and deficit down. And we sure do need to get control of the out of control NDIS and put it into more sustainable shape. But the Treasury Secretary's job is not to state the obvious to the public. His job's to give the government credible options to get all of this done. Less talk, more action. Because it's one thing to identify the problem, quite another thing to actually solve it. I suspect one of the reasons why there's been so little real reform in recent years is because senior officials like Kennedy can tell you what's wrong, but can't come up with any politically acceptable ways to turn things around. If senior officials must make public speeches, they'd do more to help if they actually laid them before the Australian public with a whole lot of hard choices, the truth. Tell us what decisions we have to make if our company is to prosper. Yes, Dr. Kennedy is right that the only way to have higher spending on health, education and welfare without lifting taxes is to boost our productivity. But to have higher productivity, we need to allow workers to work smarter rather than just harder. And that means fewer rules and regulations around who can do what, the sort of regulations and rules that unions and Labor governments love, but that crush small business. To have higher productivity, we need a workforce that's more creative. And that means an education and training system that gives people a good grounding in the basics, plus instills the curiosity and character that people need to succeed. Only that doesn't sound like the politically correct education, every child must win a prize sort of system we've got now. Dr. Kennedy would have done us all a big favour if, instead of telling us what we already know, that the NDIS is out of control and bleeding taxpayers, if he'd actually outlined some of the changes needed to make it more sustainable, like stricter eligibility rules, perhaps co-payments for those on higher incomes, and an end to taxpayer-funded outings and lawn mowing, sex workers and more. Kennedy at least might have detailed all the flaws in the existing system that people really need to understand if they're going to come on board and be willing to accept that the NDIS needs changing. But instead, the Treasury Secretary looks like all he was after was a good headline for himself, instead of using his authority as a very senior official to outline a better way forward. And yes, it's true, public servants are there to give advice and ministers are the ones that make decisions. But it's hard to make good decisions without good advice. We know that governments get a lot wrong, but listening to speeches like Dr. Kennedy, well, I reckon public servants have got to shoulder their fair share of the blame too.